Hi, welcome to the podcast. And today we have Suzanne Gundersen. I'm interviewing her about her journey with EFT. And so, what you need to know before we get started is that Suzanne Gundersen is an EFT practitioner. She has a program that she helps women who are struggling with self esteem issues, with anxiety, with all of that kind of stuff that goes on. And that she has an amazing EFT tapping story. So she has been using healing techniques for herself for many, many years. And she went to Gary Craig and became an EFT tapping practitioner more than 10 years ago. And what you need to know is that Suzanne has struggled with her weight. And for the last 10 years, she has kept herself at a very healthy weight after learning EFT tapping, after using it and working with a coach and doing it on her own. And so her story is so amazing because she makes a shift from at one point in her life being over 450 pounds to arriving at a very healthy weight, which she has maintained for the past 10 years. And she has so much to share about EFT tapping, and it's really good stuff that I think you're going to want to hear in this healing modality that you can put to use in your own life. Plus, I'm going to be sharing with you some information about how you can contact Suzanne at the end of this interview and in the notes. Great. So let's get started. Everybody, please join me in welcoming Suzanne Gundersen to the show. She is an EFT practitioner, and I am so excited to bring you her tapping story. Welcome, Suzanne.
Oh, thank you for having me here.
Great. So we did a little bit of talking earlier, and I just want to really dig into your tapping story because I know it was a really big pivotal point in your life when you found tapping.
Absolutely. So thanks for having me on and sharing my story. I think so many of us come to these types of techniques because we've got something that we're looking to solve. And, I spent the early part of my life really tripping over a lot of Western medicine approaches that were really having me stay stuck and struggling in my chronic stress, anxiety, and my emotional overeating. And I think got to the point where it was so bad. I mean, at the height of my weight and my anxiety, I was using about 10 Xanax a day, along with some Effexor and Paxil, so heavily medicated, alongside of having a significant emotional overeating problem where I was up to over 450 pounds. So I think I was just like at the point of something has to change here. And the first thing that kind of came my way, holistically, alternatively, was hypnosis. And I became infatuated with the idea of hypnosis. And that was probably, somewhere in my late 20s that I kind of discovered that. So it really was an eye-opener to me just to kind of think that there was a new way of approaching my problems as opposed to how I had been conditioned to believe for so long. And it was through my hypnosis experience with a really wonderful hypnotherapist practitioner that I decided to study it and get certified in it myself, because that's just kind of who I am. If I like something, I want to get to know it more and learn it and get into all the details of it and how does it operate? How does it work? And from hypnosis, it just kind of organically led me to neuro-linguistic programming. And I got to meet Richard Bandler because I live in South Florida and he's in Orlando. And I was just infatuated with the idea of a science of how we think, because I'm just such an overthinker. I love to think. I'm always in my head, and I'm a woman and I love to think. So I'm always thinking all the time. So to find ways and an approach on how to change the thoughts in my mind it was brilliant to me. And in the evolution of learning NLP and getting certified in NLP, I kind of got into the world of energy medicine through Donna Eden's work, and then introduced to Gary Craig and all of the wonderfulness of EFT. I started to get certified with Gary. And in that, I was applying all of these holistic methods into my life, and I was noticing that I was just doing things differently for myself. I was feeling a little bit more happier about things. I wasn't eating some of the same foods that I had been eating. And it really helped me to be able to see what was at the root, the intuitive root of what was really happening to create some of that dysfunctional experience in my life. I think, I'm born in 71, so I don't know your audience is listening, what their age range is, but between the 70s and the 80s, I think, and my mother was a registered nurse, and all of our family was doctors and nurses, and they prided themselves on, we've diagnosed you, and this is your problem. You have anxiety. You have a stress problem, and this is how we treat that. As opposed to, well, what's really going on to create that situation for you? It really wasn't something that was talked about back then. It was more like, we diagnosed you, and this is how we're going to treat you. And I always felt like something was wrong with me. I didn't know what. But all these tools that I was kind of gaining momentum toward building into my life is what I call my stress relief toolbox. Really helped me to unravel in a safe way, to get to that intuitive truth about what was behind a lot of that dysfunction I was experiencing through my chronic anxiety and stress and emotional eating, to be able to start to really come to a place of more self-connection, authentically and with more peace in my body. So I was able to do all that.
Okay. That's really awesome. So I want to ask you, before you found all of this, how big was the struggle for you? Can you describe what that was like?
Sure. Well, I was the kid that went to school in the first grade with a salad, because I was a chubby kid growing up. And by the time I graduated high school, I was over 350 pounds and there wasn't really healthy food choices out there. There was like the fat-free craze, and then there was, the sugar-free craze. And I was following a lot of mainstream diets because I thought that was going to be my answer. So I really had a lot of crazy attempts and different diets over the years where I tried, I did the cabbage soup diet. I tried, a baby food diet. I tried all different kinds of crazy diets because I thought that, well, if I just follow these diets, I'll be able to drop this weight. So I really, really struggled. I would lose a little bit, but then it wouldn't be significant enough. And it really wasn't getting at what was the cause of my weight. So yeah, it was definitely a struggle. And in my 20s, I literally would like white knuckle down on like the Weight Watchers, and I would lose a lot of weight, and I would get super, super unhealthy. And I've got pictures of my whole story on my website if anyone's interested to go over there and look. And you can see what I looked like when I was 450 pounds when I graduated college, and then 135 pounds, 2 years later, and then back up to, 275 pounds, and then down to 150 pounds. It was just my poor body. What I was doing to it with all of these crazy diets. I was going to the doctor, and I would be told that I had low cholesterol, and a low heartbeat, and all these things that I would think, well, I'm thin, I should be healthy, and it wasn't the case. So my health was in a range of dysregulation all over the place. It was a real struggle. What to eat, what to believe, what fads are out there, what's right, what's wrong.
Right.
And always just going, well, if everybody else has got this figured out, what is my problem? I don't understand.
Mm-hmm. So it's interesting. You said, if everybody else has this figured out. And I'm wondering, like, if that's really the case, if everybody else has this figured out, like, or is that just a perception that when we're struggling that we have?
Oh, that's totally, yeah. You're right on there. I think that's what we think, is that everybody else has got some kind of answer that you haven't figured out, but the answer truly is unique to you. And the more you come into alignment with who you are, then the solution will appear for you. There are some people out there that are overweight because they eat poorly and they don't know about better food choices. I think it's harder to know that now because there's so much awareness through the internet about what's healthy food and what's not healthy food. And sometimes we even have a complex hour. We go, well, I'm going to have a little something sweet as a treat, because you shouldn't, or your body doesn't like sugar. It's not good for you. So I think, but back then it was probably, there wasn't as much knowledge. So there were people that were overweight in that generation that maybe through the 80s and the 90s that didn't have the knowledge about what was healthy or not. And so when they made some of those simple changes, simple meaning, well, here, just eat this type of a healthier food, then they were able to lose weight, as opposed to other people that might have had the weight for other emotional reasons, for protection of whatever from some type of a trauma that they may have experienced. And so it's not all one size fits all, but when you're in the category of I'm trying everything that I can and I'm following it and it's not working, everybody else has got to figure it out. Nobody's got it figured out. Everyone needs to kind of go their own journey as to what is right for them.
Cool, good. You know, when you kind of started with tapping, it made a pretty big change. And could you explain how that went for you?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So I had found Gary online and I immediately ordered his online course and was tapping along to him and Pat Carrington and all the early people in the tapping world and some of his tapping masters. And I didn't know what I was doing. I literally was just tapping like, I'm always safe, I'm always secure, I love myself, I approve of myself, I have peace with myself, I love and accept myself. I didn't know what that was meaning or doing. I just was being consistent with it. And I started to notice some differences in my life based on food choices that I was making. You know, I used to be like an ice creamaholic. And all of a sudden I just noticed that I wasn't eating as much ice cream. I wasn't going to the store and buying the ice cream that I used to buy and the quantities that I used to buy it in. So in the beginning, I didn't know if I was tapping on the right point. I was all, well, where is it exactly? And what do I say? And how long do I do it? And am I doing it right? Oh, I don't know what I'm doing. And I just said, oh, I'm going to just keep doing it anyway. And, you know, about 6 months into it, I just started to notice some changes, like I said, about how I was making different food choices for myself and feeling a little bit better about my life. But I wasn't attributing it completely to tapping, but I just thought, makes me feel good enough, I'll just keep doing it kind of thing. In the beginning, I was clueless. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know what to say, where to tap, if I was doing it right, how long to tap. You know, I just was kind of following along, and there wasn't a lot of information about it back then. You know, the internet wasn't like it is today. So it was kind of like old text looking websites and things, you know, you're like, what does that say? There were a few videos out there. And so I was, you know, watching, you know, Gary's DVDs all the time.
Yeah.
So yeah, in the beginning, clueless. I mean, the first 6 months, didn't know what I was doing, but just started to see some things changing in my life. And now I joke when I tell the story about how I used to be this ice creamaholic, like just eating so much ice cream every day and making sure my freezer was full of ice cream. And now I don't even eat dairy. I mean, if you know me, I haven't eaten dairy in probably 10 years because my body doesn't like dairy. Not because of any other reason. It's just my body doesn't like it. But tell my body that back then, clueless, didn't have any idea. So in the beginning, I kind of clued you with tapping. I didn't really know much about it, but for some reason I stuck with it, you know, and it really stuck with me.
It sounds like it created an awareness within yourself about what types of foods work for you. So like as you did the tapping, you maybe got in touch with being able to be present in your body. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I would agree with you 100%. I think at the time, I wouldn't have put those two things together. I wouldn't have said that. It was just, I was having the experience of doing this ritual every day for a few minutes, saying these few words, doing the 9 gamut, humming, counting, you know, the eyes back and forth, the whole traditional, you know, EFT protocol. Just doing it every time I felt you know, a disruption or some kind of disturbance. But really wasn't thinking about how that was going to bring me to more awareness because I didn't know how unconscious I really was at the time. When you're unconscious, you're unconscious. In retrospect, I totally see it as helping me have awareness to be able to stay present in my body's experience of what I needed to process. But I didn't have safety cues for when I was needing to process it the first time it happened. And I really was teaching my body resilience by doing the tapping. That way I could be tolerant of whatever emotion I was experiencing and using the tapping to help it move through my body's experience of it and not have to go cope with, you know, chocolate chip cookies or carrot cake or ice cream or whatever it is that I wanted to eat, you know?
Yeah. So before you were doing all of this, I'm kind of curious because I think self-talk is a place that people get caught up in, kind of like beating themselves up. What kind of self-talk did you have?
Oh, great question. I mean, it's funny when I get asked this question now, I have to think like, okay, let me put myself in my other world mind that I don't have anymore because I've let so much of that go. I almost have to like really scrape back to be like, what was that like? And it really was torture. I mean, I really had no self-confidence, no self-esteem. I was raised by a mother who was a people pleaser and a father who was emotionally unavailable and very insensitive and verbally abusive. And I took on a lot of those of his projections from a very early age when he was telling me, you know, you're stupid, you're ugly, you'll amount to nothing. We have to send you to school and hope that you can get educated because you will not be anything in your life. And I
Wow.
grew up with that in my head as like a mantra that I carried for decades. And to go to my mother to ask for that kind of nurturing connection, she wasn't present for me to offer any kind of regulated compassion for me to overcome that.
Hmm.
So that really was always my mantra, that there was something wrong with me. I was a problem in the world. I would never be good enough. The best I could do is hope that I could get smart in some way and be able to support myself. And I just kind of bared down and accepted that because no one was helping me understand differently.
Hmm.
And my world experience and being 450 pounds, it's very visible to the world. And you can't hide that. And so you're on the receiving end of a lot of projected shame and unworthiness and grief. And it was a lot to carry as a burden, but that self-dialogue just fueled itself.
Hmm.
Until I really, in my early 30s, I moved from the very hectic Northeast. I lived in New York City for many years and worked there. I moved to Florida and I thought, oh, a bunch of old people there. It's going to be nice and quiet. No one's really going to bother me there. And it gave me the space to be able to feel safe enough to process some of these thoughts in my mind that I carried as just really unhealthy ways of living in the world, which was how I thought about myself. Now I'm really in touch with my immense value and have a lot of confidence and feel very safe being in my body's experience, which I never thought that I ever would be. I always was very uncomfortable in my body all the time.
Okay, so that's a great transformation to go from that kind of self-talk to really have picked up that information from your parents
Yeah.
and then repeated it to yourself,
Oh, yeah.
kind of like it was really the truth about yourself.
Oh, yeah. Because when you're little, I mean, you're learning like a sponge from your caregivers. And therein lies how you shape your identity that you walk the planet with.
Hmm.
And without any other influencers, you know, to tell me different, I was, well, that's my parent. And that's what they're telling me. It has to be true. I
Hmm.
was in that very sensitive space of just believing everything that they told me. Yet I was watching people around me have a different life experience. And I remember almost interacting with other people like, how can you do this if you're not good either? If if you're not going to be smart, you go to the same school I do, so you must be there because you're not good enough and you're bad and you're this. But how is it that you're thriving? I didn't understand. I
Hmm.
couldn't figure it out, which only made me feel like worse because people were having a better experience than I was having, and I
Right.
was like, wait a minute, you know. So it was very difficult. You know?
Yeah. So now, when you talked about doing the tapping, you were saying, I love myself. I'm,
I'm
those
always
kinds of
safe.
positive affirmation. I'm always safe. Did you, because, the teaching about tapping is to focus on negative
Right.
events
Oh,
and
yeah.
experiences. And did you do any of that at all?
Yeah, I was doing the traditional EFT protocol where you'd focus on a negative emotion and then you'd say, even though I have this feeling, I love and accept myself, this feeling, this feeling, this feeling, this feeling. And I would go through the whole thing.
Hmm.
But just as a daily mantra, like every morning when I would wake up and after I brush my teeth for 5 minutes, I would do, I'm always safe, I'm always secure. I love myself. I approve of myself. I'm at peace with myself. I love and accept myself. And I actually got that from David Childerley. He's a London-based tapper that was around a long time ago. He's one of the first YouTube tapping people that was out there that I
Okay.
found. So he had done that one specifically for weight loss, and I was like, I'll do it. It was easy enough. So yeah, I get that when we share about tapping, we often recommend you have to go to what you don't want
Hmm.
because you know how to see that, hear that, smell that, taste that, touch it. it's so crystal clear within us, and that's what we have to help shift and move. So yeah, we start with the negative when we're tapping. But back then I didn't know what I was doing, and I just it was making me feel a little bit better. I often have the analogy of, it was kind of like swimming upstream, paddling upstream with a spoon, but I was trying to go, somewhere.
Yeah. Okay, great. So now, do you have a morning routine around tapping or any other thing that you do every day?
Yeah, I think what I've learned over the years is that those first few minutes when you first wake up, before you even really open your eyes, that you're still in this and you're in this space where you can access your subconscious programming. And it's so important when you wake up to say positive things to yourself and be in a state of enthusiasm and excitement and anticipation for the day. So before I even wake up, I'm in my bed and I'm either listening to a meditation that I've recorded with my own voice. I recommend a lot to do that in your own voice, and having like I am type of affirmations that you say to yourself, and listening to them during those periods. So I do that a little bit in the morning, whether I'm listening to it or I'm saying it to myself. And then I usually get up and brush my teeth, and I do a little bit of the energy exercises daily routine. The one specifically that I do every day is the 4 thumps, where you get a nice balance on your cheekbones, you balance on your collarbones, you pound your thymus, and you spleen points.
And that's that Donna Eden routine, right?
Yeah, I love her. She has a longer, like 5-minute version of it, but that's the one that I do every morning. And then throughout the day, I kind of keep up some maintenance on that. If I had an important phone call about 2 hours ago, and right before that, maybe 15 minutes before, I took a good 10 minutes just to do that exercises routine, get that going.
Perfect. Great. Yeah, that energy is so important when you are meeting with someone, just to be on your best game so that you have a positive outcome. Yeah. Awesome.
So I do that every day. And then try and keep up with it throughout the day based on where I might be seeing my energy levels at.
Okay. So now, as a practitioner, how do you work with people?
Great question. So I specifically work with women, and I help them to relieve anxiety and chronic stress symptoms. Whether those chronic stress symptoms are, emotional or are they physical. And I have an approach called the ACE method. And it's just over time, I've kind of developed this methodology of how I help women move from what they don't want to what they do want. They often come to me and tell me, this is my problem, this is where I'm at, and I'm like, well, what do you want? They're like, I don't want this problem. I don't want this. I'm like, well, what do you want? I don't want this problem anymore. So okay, well, we'll start there. So my ACE method stands for awareness, connection, and expansion. It's just a methodology of transformation that I take people through. And usually in the first session, I collect information of their story, which is where they're at, where they want to do a little bit of talking. And with that, we start to then go into, well, what triggers those types of reactions, and get a little bit deeper into, what's the intuitive truth behind it? Where do these grown-up versions of these triggers come from? And start to trace back, what maybe their roots are. And then when they have that awareness, we can do some clearing work using the tapping. And then once we do some clearing, then you're able to reconnect to yourself and your own inner wisdom and your own senses to be able to know what your yes feels like, know what your no feels like, and then feel safe enough to be able to express them through healthy, self-respecting boundaries. And then when you build up enough momentum with that, you can then have the confidence to go out and express yourself and expand in the world with what it is that you want to do. So that's my awareness, connection, expansion approach. And through the entire series, sequence of how I'm working with clients, we're doing the tapping to clear deeper levels and deeper levels that get us closer and closer to the root of the problem. I use the analogy of, we're not just here to mow the lawn and make it look pretty. We're here to really weed this stuff out at the root. The lawn will grow back. We want to just dig it out.
Okay, excellent. So I really like that ACE, that awareness, connection, and expansion. I really love that you work to have them become aware of what's going on, what the triggers are, and then what's the truth underneath that. That truth is my word. It wasn't what you said. And then doing the tapping which then brings them into that connection with what's going on inside them. And I
Right.
think, and maybe you can speak to this a little bit, that connection is really important because it doesn't feel good in people's bodies, women, men, whoever, when they are struggling with something. And so they are focused on something outside themselves.
Right. Absolutely. So, I use the analogy of we walk around being overstimulated by the world. We become overwhelmed. It's like living in a tornado. And tornadoes are wild, fast, and out of control. Nobody likes to go near a tornado. But when you're tapping, it helps to calm down that tornado of all the mental, mechanical thoughts that keep spinning, and also your body's reaction to that. That way you can have some space away from the tornado. And that, I think, is what tapping really helps us, be able to do, is get that calm into that calm, peaceful place, or more calm than we were when we were in a tornado, to have the perspective to go, oh, that's where I was at. And so then you can know the difference between I'm living in reaction mode all the time and I'm choosing how I want to respond to life. I can see the tornado is right in front of me. I'm not going to react to it because now I've processed my body's reaction from before, so I can be resilient to look at it. And now I have choice. I don't want to engage in it, or how I'm going to engage in it now, as opposed to constantly letting yourself be bombarded and living in the tornado. And then you're just reacting and reacting and reacting and reacting and reacting, and then you just never get anywhere. So I think we're all looking for some relief that gives us the perspective to have the space to choose how we want to engage in our life, as opposed to just reacting to it. And sometimes when you're in the tornado, you don't realize it. And this is why you need to have some good friends to be like, hey, you're in the tornado right now. And calm yourself down, and then you'll have some perspective.
Yes. And then you talked about, that expansion, but right in there you mentioned setting boundaries.
Yes.
And I know from experience, and I've met many other people where they just don't have a sense of boundary. And so what's your experience with not having a sense of boundary, and what's your advice about setting those clear and helpful boundaries?
So glad you asked that question. I think everyone needs to know that they have permission to live their life on their terms for where they're at, and that they should know that no one is going to understand them from their level of perception. They only understand you from their level of perception, not yours. And so we have grown up in this generation, and I say generation collectively. If you're alive right now, I'm going to group you all into this, this conscious collective right now. We have all grown up being conditioned to be trained to live by groups, organizations, institutions, cultures, religions, jobs, families, everything, to behave in ways for them, for rules that we collectively agreed to. And I think that we're now, in the last 5 years, and certainly going forward, we are living in transformative times where we're noticing that a lot of those structures were built on faulty foundations. And yet we agreed to live by those terms. So now we're having an opportunity, I say, but for some, identity crisis of, well, if I don't belong to that anymore, well, who am I? Well, you're you. Well, what does that mean to be you? And what does that mean to say yes to you? What does yes in your body feel like? What does no in your body feel like? And then have those self-honoring, have that self-honoring perspective to be able to express yourself in that way. And know how close you allow people into your life to influence you in ways that are gonna, knock you off your own alignment. So creating those boundaries for yourself is a journey. You have to try it out with certain people. The more you weed out all of the references that may be keeping you stressed, anxious, whatever it might be, and you get to that place of calm where you're outside of the tornado and you're now in your body and you get to choose, you can practice to say, okay, well, I'm going to be compassionate and thoughtful to Michael, and I'm going to share with him just enough for him to share back with me where he's at. And then I'll know if I will allow him in one step further or one step further. But before, I think we just said, well, who am I? Give me my identity and I'll go play by your rules. And in which case we had no boundaries. We really were raised in a generation of no boundaries because we had to live by rules outside of ourselves. I think the paradigm is changing and we're coming to trying to, live by our own rules. And with that, we're learning, our own value and who we are to really start to claim our worthiness like none other time we've ever experienced, and start to exchange ourselves based on our worthiness. But it's a journey, and so you've got to practice. I would say have the boundary be a little bit more than less, because you can always take away some. You can't push back. It's harder.
So yeah, that's really wonderful. I'm really glad that you were able to share all of that about your journey, and how you brought yourself to what I would call a healthy state in your life, where you have boundaries, where you feel good about yourself, where you're glad to wake up every day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was not easy. I mean, I had to literally fight for my life.
Mm-hmm.
Fight for my life because in all accounts, honestly, the doctors told me when I was about 28 that I should be dead. I mean, there's just no way with all of what I had done to my body, with all the medication, with the crazy diets I had put myself through, and almost just being so sickly, unhealthy from being too skinny, and really hurting my body, that I shouldn't have lived through that period. I mean, they were like amazed that I didn't die. All the medication and all the crazy things I was doing. And I really there was some other will inside of me that said, well, if I'm going to live, it's going to be with aliveness. And I want to get to that point. So I really had to fight for my own life. And, while I did the I'm always safe, I'm always secure, I love myself, that routine. And then also did, the traditional EFT approach on clearing out all negative feelings. I did do a little bit more of a diligent, as I learned more, EFT, I brought in more structure around my tapping and just tapping specifically on how I felt about my body, how I felt about important people in my life, how I felt about my trigger foods, how I felt about, my whole weight story and what that meant to me. And as I started to tap, I would neutralize my connection to many of those things. And really what that led me was to a place of honoring who I truly am. That way I could express myself that way in a whole new way and engage with the world. That way I wasn't constantly reacting. And I also had distanced myself from a lot of triggers in my life intuitively. I didn't do it intentionally. It was just something that kind of came to me. And that really was helpful also, was to have that space from not being triggered all the time, to be able to be more introspective in a safe way.
Nice. That's great. It sounds like when you were 28 that there was this resilience within inside of you that stood up for you, that just kind of popped up. I mean, here are these doctors saying to you, you really ought to be dead.
Yeah.
And that part of you, the true part of you said, I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
I'm no longer going to listen to the story that you're feeding me. Does that make sense to you? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was at that time that I probably had asked the universe, my inner being, whoever, what else, what can really help me? And it was within, 2 or 3 years from that I left that area and moved to Florida, and really started to slow down enough to start to invite in and receive the holistic approaches that really transformed my whole life. And I've been off all medication and at a healthy body weight for over 10 years now. I think when we were talking pre-recording, I was mentioning that, I held on to all my medication for years, even after I didn't use it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Until it was like way expired. And I was like, oh, I should still keep it anyway, because I didn't know. I mean, it was the same thing in my freezer. It had freezer burn on it. And I was like, but I should probably just keep it there just in case,
Oh, the ice cream, yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was a journey for me to be able to really let go of those things out of my life. And then every time I made achieved another milestone, it would come with another 50 pounds, another 100 pounds. And I felt more and more safe in my body.
Nice.
And there are, sadly, there are family members in my life that I are no longer connected to, because they are still unconscious, wounded, and living in dysfunction. And, I need to have a boundary for myself, because
Mm-hmm.
they might call me crazy, but I wake up every day and I feel better about myself, about the world. And that's not easy. We live in really tough times.
It sounds like that's a really difficult thing to essentially, if I'm hearing you right, cut off a family member. Because we learn growing up that family is number one in a sense. And that connection can really become kind of an attachment. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I was raised by codependent, dysfunctional people.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned my favorite programs were to be codependent and dysfunctional. My relationships in my personal life were codependent and dysfunctional in honor of my connection with my family.
Mm-hmm.
And as I unraveled those dysfunctional programs inside of me and was making better choices for myself, because they were aligned with who I truly am, it no longer resonated with them. And I had difficulty being in their world and not feeling obligated or sucked into the old ways of being to just make them feel better.
Mm.
I had spent enough time feeling bad about myself based on what I had learned in the programming from them.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to just make a choice to say, if I'm going to stay here and be on this planet, I want to stay here being healthy, mind and body. And that means giving myself what I need. And sorry, mom, dad, sister, cousin, whoever it might have been, that I can't have you in my life. And in the beginning, it was a very hard wall of no contact. And then over the years, now it's just kind of minimal, like hello or a text message or a birthday card or things like that. Things that I can still feel are going to help me keep my sea legs, keep my sea legs about me. That way I'm not wobbling. And because I mean, this is my own healing journey too. I mean, I got into becoming a practitioner because 15 years ago, there weren't a lot of people that were doing this. And I wanted to have a way to keep this language that I had learned fluid in my life. I had this whole hypnosis language, this neuro-linguistic programming language, the energy medicine, the tapping.
Mm-hmm.
And I had no one to play with, to share it with. So I thought, okay, I'll start a small business doing it, and those people who know about it will come to me, and I'll be able to, practice with them. And that kind of kept it really very fluid in my life. And it was a way to keep that, it's like when you learn a different language, you want somebody to practice it with.
Right.
Or else you forget it.
Yeah.
So I wanted to remember.
You can learn Spanish all you want, but if you don't practice it, gone.
Right, exactly. So I did that selfishly to be able to have that in my life and remind myself, oh, use your tools.
Mm-hmm.
And 10 years later now, I teach women to create a stress relief toolbox for themselves, which encompasses a lot of the different alternative holistic things that I've learned over the years that really work well for me. I mean, you're looking at me this way, but if you saw me this way, you'd see my whole wall of cool stuff that I have. That's my own stress relief toolbox.
Okay, excellent. So speaking of your stress relief toolbox, how can women find you and get in touch with you if they want to work with you?
Oh, thank you for asking. So I have a Facebook group called the Empowered Tapping Revolution. It's for women only to build inner wisdom and resiliency for life stresses using tapping, among some other, support and strategies that I share on the group. Do lots of live video tapping on there, and it's a free group to join, so you're welcome to go and join online. I also have a YouTube channel called Transformed Connections, where I post lots of videos on tapping. I host a lot of online shows, so I always put copies of my shows over on the YouTube. And I have a website called Transformed Connections, and I offer transformation mentoring. It's a one-on-one private online mentoring service where we really get into the intuitive truth of your stress, and we transform it at the root. That way you get some results faster.
Great, awesome. So, and I'm going to actually take the URLs, the website names, and put them in the notes so people can access that rather than try to remember what you've just said.
Right, sure.
And so I'm kind of running out of time. And so we're going to wrap this up. Is there anything else you'd like to say?
No, I will say that if you're on your tapping journey and you're started, or you're in the middle of it, or you're looking back at it and say it never worked for me, Tapping really requires, the one key trick to tapping is to be specific. So if you're not getting results, get specific about your focus on where your struggle is. Get really, really narrow about it, and that will take you closer to the root. That way you can start to see results. And if you're not seeing results really quickly, be willing and persistent, because there can be a lot of momentum behind problems that you may be having in your life that, take more time to be able to resolve. This is not a one-hit wonder. This is not an overnight fix. I can't tell you in X number of sessions that this is going to be gone. You need to learn that awareness for yourself as to what you're doing to contribute to your own stress and how you play a part in it. And then when you're willing to take that responsibility, things move much more quickly. But still, there could be some momentum behind things that are going to take a little bit longer. So get specific and be willing and persistent to keep it up.
Excellent. And thank you for saying that it's not a one-hit wonder, that it is a journey, that it takes time, because I think there's a propensity to become impatient with the process.
Oh, yeah.
And just to have that persistence to go back to it over and over again and know that even when it doesn't seem like something's happening, getting more specific, like you said, getting down to that granular, narrow level,
yeah,
the root of it. And then one day you see the change. One day you're like, whoa, wow, is that how it is?
Be persistent, Yeah. And you know what? If tapping resonates with you, amazing. If it doesn't resonate with you, go find something that does and practice the heck out of it, because we need tools and skills to keep emotionally, mentally, physically, spiritually fit. We need them. It's not an option any longer. You need to have something that you have in your own stress relief toolbox. If tapping is it for you, amazing. If it's not, go find the thing for yourself. If you want someone to work out with you to help you realize if it resonates with you or not, there are amazing practitioners all over the globe. There is somebody out there for you.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us today. I love it. It was wonderful having the opportunity to ask you all these questions and hear your answers here, all about how you moved through the struggles, the untruth that you thought was true, and came to being your best healthy you at this point. And if you're like everybody else and myself, I would guess that there's more journey to go.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for having me and for listening to me today.
You're welcome. Yes. Wonderful. So everybody take a look at the show notes. If you're a woman, especially, and you want to contact Susan, you'll find a way to do that there. And thank you all so much for listening. Hey, thanks for watching my cool video. If you haven't subscribed, please click subscribe for the channel. Also, click the link in the comments to sign up for exclusive content not shared here on YouTube that will help you take your life to the next level.